Hey everyone, it's Jessie G here. Welcome back to Jessie's Hangout Season 2. This is episode number 5. Welcome. Today's episode is all about the Tower of London, which is located on the River Thames, if I'm saying it right, in central London. We're going to talk all about it today, but before I get into today's topic, I'm going to read off a disclaimer and also give you a trigger sensitive warning. And without further ado, let's get into it. Copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act 1976. Allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as comment, criticism, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, education, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by the copyright statute that might otherwise be interfering. Non-profit or personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use. And as for the trigger and sensitive warning, because it's all about the Tower of London, and of course if some topics might be a little bit dark because of the dark history that it holds, I'm going to go ahead and give you all a trigger and sensitive warning right now. If you are triggered or you are sensitive to any of the topics that are going to be discussed in today's episode, I highly recommend you don't listen to today's episode. I highly recommend you go find an episode that's less triggering and less sensitive. But if you do choose to listen to today's episode at your own discretion, I highly recommend you seek out your emotional support system, such as your significant other, your partner, somebody you love and trust enough to sit down with you and listen to today's episode with you. And without further ado, let's get into today's episode. Also, if you are new here to my channel and you happen to have come across this episode and you got to listen to me babble for the first part of it, and you are a type of person that is interested in a podcast series that is open topic, like Jessie's Hangout is, please don't forget to hit that red subscribe button and that notification bell so you don't miss out on any good episodes or any other videos on this channel in the future. And also if you are really interested in these types of videos as well. So without further ado, let's get into today's topic now. Alright. Here we go. It's still playing. Alright. I had to set my notebook on my iPad. The Tower of London is England's most popular historical sites. There's other sites of the of London that are really historically popular, like Hampton Court Palace or Place. I don't know exactly which one they call it. And that's where King Henry would stay at and entertain people. He would live there. That's supposedly that was what Wolsey was building, and it became in possession of Wolsey, and supposedly Wolsey gave it to Henry, and then Henry just kind of did what he wanted with the Hampton Court Palace or Place. Also, there is a bridge that is located in central London that is located on the other side of the Tower of London. You can see it from the Tower of London. It's a really popular bridge. There's another one that's a really popular bridge as well. And they're really big. Ferris wheel is really popular as well. It's pretty huge. There's a lot of historical sites there, but nothing compared to the Tower of London. The Tower of London stretched 12 acres. One way an additional 2 acres, so it's pretty huge. So basically all together, it is about 17 acres total, and it's really huge. It's because of the wall that wraps around it. The first tower to be built on the 17 acres was the White Tower. It was built by William the Conqueror in 1078. The rest of the construction of the tower and of the tower wall and of the expansions and everything were done by Richard I, Henry III, Edward I between the 12th and 13th centuries. The inner tower was built and 1,190. And then it was rebuilt, supposedly due to either structural failure or wars going on during that time period. So it was rebuilt again in 1,285, and then wealth expansions was done to it between 1377 and 1399. The Tower of London not only served as a place for the kings and queens to go and feel safe during war times or during rebellions during that time, or even just to be there to entertain people. It also served as a prison, so it was kind of doing double the purpose. It also had a chapel there because it served as a prison. The Tower of London, the Tower Green, served as a prison for in between 1,100 to 1952, is when it finally became a place for people to tour and to look at and to see what's the historical facts about it and see what it's like on the inside of the structure. And all that sorts. The Tower Green has got a lot of dark history to it. One of the dark histories that also, there's a lot of it, but one of the ones that was basically kind of turned into a story where every story and everybody kind of had their theories as to what happened. Elizabeth Woodville's son, Edward V, and Richard IV, the princes that vanished, they were in the Tower of London because they were the princes that were supposed to rule over England. And I think Richard, supposedly, this is just my opinion, supposedly I think he overthrew them and became the king himself. And he married Anne Neville, Lord Warwick's daughter, one of his daughters. I think he was so scared that when they would grow up, they would overthrow the throne. And I think he put them in the tower. And during that year, I think in the middle of the summer, like sometime in June of that time, it was 1483 around that time, I think it was, something around there, and the princess disappeared. And nobody's ever seen what happened to them. People have their own speculations as to what happened. People have their own theories as to what happened to them. Nobody really, truly, exactly knows what happened to the princess. And that's pretty scary to me because, you know, back in those days, when something disappeared, it disappeared. And whether it was found to this day, that remains to be seen. Alright. The people who were executed at the Tower Green was Anne Boleyn, Catherine Howard, Robert Devereux, who was the Earl of Leicester's stepson, who was also named Robert. The Earl of Leicester was one of the many men that was very close to Elizabeth I. She was very close to Robert Dudley. They had something that we would call nowadays a relationship, but it grew to be just friends after some certain circumstances caused them to no longer see each other in private again. Margaret, the Countess of Salisbury, she was the last of the Plantagenet dynasty. There's still more descendants of the Plantagenets still. They haven't been completely wiped out, but they were wiped out from ever succeeding to the throne, and Margaret of Salisbury was one of them. Her son and her grandson were also executed because of it. Henry was that scared of them. He didn't want to go through what his father went through to get to the throne because of the Plantagenets. And also, Margaret of Salisbury had a hand in helping the rebellion that rose up against Henry VIII. She was the one that made the banners and everything and hid them in her house. So that's how Margaret of Salisbury ended up falling from grace, basically. Jane Boleyn, George Boleyn's wife, who he was executed for incest with his sister Anne Boleyn, who was falsely accused of it. Jane Boleyn was executed due to not only being mentally and physically insane because she was in that prison, because she had a hand in helping Catherine Howard commit adultery. And she knew also of Catherine's, I wouldn't necessarily say marriage contract, but kind of sort of that way, to Francis Derham, if I'm saying his name right. She had a fling with him when she was younger, and she knew about it. She knew about the secret meetings between Culpeper and Culpeper and Catherine, sorry. Jessie G will get her words right eventually. Yeah, so she ended up being executed. But the thing of it is when Jane Boleyn was executed, it was hard at first for Henry to execute Jane because she was mentally and physically insane from being in the Tower of London. But because of him being as greedy and angry as he was, he found a way to pass a bill to be able to execute a person who was mentally and physically insane that was charged with high treason. So he was able to execute Jane Boleyn because of that. Lady Jane Grey was also one of the ones that was executed at the Tower of London. She was executed for not only seizing the throne, but she was executed for trying to take it from Mary. And also Jane Seymour's brother, Edward Seymour, was also executed for his part in placing Lady Jane Grey on the throne, and a lot of other things, I would imagine, and the fact that he was a Protestant. Basically, Cliff Notes version, or short version, he was basically executed for trying to conspire against Mary and putting Lady Jane Grey on the throne, because he knew that if Mary the First was to ever take the throne, she would slaughter thousands upon thousands of Protestants, which she did during the time when Catholics and Protestants were butting heads with each other in religion area. It was a really big thing. It was almost like the White Roses, the War of the White Roses against York and I think the Plantagenets or something like that. And it was really, really difficult during those times to be a Protestant, to basically be a Christian that time. It was very dangerous during that time, especially when Henry ruled over England. It was very dangerous. So that was why he was executed and Lady Jane Grey was executed. Sadly, I think Lady Jane Grey was about 19 years old, somewhere in there, when she was executed. Catherine Howard was almost into her 20s when she was executed. Anne was into her 30s when she was executed, and Jane Boleyn, I think, was in her 20s when she was executed. So they were really young when they were executed. There was I'm going to go ahead and do a video on Catherine Howard, if I haven't, to explain a little bit in depth as to why they can't find her body still to this day. When Queen Victoria ruled over England during her times, she renovated the St. Peter's Chapel, but it's called something else, but that's what I'm calling it. It was the chapel that Anne Boleyn was buried in at first, and they had all of the bodies that were underneath that chapel or in that chapel exhumed and put it in a safe place until the renovations on the chapel were done, and they were put on the floor with these little marble stone carved their name and their shield or rank or whatever. And it was also said that, and I explained this in the Anne Boleyn episode, but I'll explain it in here. When they resurrected the body of Anne Boleyn, historians believe that the body may not actually be Anne Boleyn's. It might be Lady Jane Grey's body or somebody else's body. They're not really sure exactly who, but they're speculating that it might be her and it might not be Anne, that Anne's body might be still out there. But we won't ever know because historians are not allowed to dig up the grave of a queen anyway, so. The Tower of London has not only been through the War of the Roses, the religious wars that were going on, rebellions, other wars, it also survived through World War I and World War II. It also survived through that. There are some ruins that are located by the Tower Green and the Queen's apartments, where other parts of the tower stood. It's all in ruins now, and it's basically a home for like 12 or 6 crows now, or ravens, ravens. It was said to King Charles II that if there were, by a lady that he sought out, that if the ravens were to ever leave the Tower of London would fall. And that's mainly the reason why the tower still stands, is because of that legend or that myth. If you were a person that believes in that stuff. What else? If you go and visit the Tower of London and you go in through the tower where you find all the stuff that was normally used for torture devices and execution devices, there is a display of the block and the axe in the middle. It was said to be it was said to be sort of the type of axe and block that was used to execute Catherine and many others, except for Anne. She was executed by the sword, so there is that. There's also an armory in the tower where there's a armor. Also, some of the Queen's jewelry is in there. It's not only in there, but it's also in Westminster Abbey as well. You can see some of the collection of the Queen's jewelry there. Also, 2 other gentlemen that were executed at the Tower of London was Sir Thomas More and Bishop Fisher. Their bodies were never found, but if you go to the Tower Green, there's also a memorial fountain dedicated to those 2 men, Anne Boleyn, Catherine Howard, and so on, to the people who were really historical figures who made a dent in the world in London, 15th century London, and they were remembered by the Queen. So yeah. Oh, and it's also said that Richard III's body also was finally found after he was killed by Henry VIII's father, Henry VII. I don't know if he's actually built in the or buried in the chapel or not. I'm not really sure, but there's like 41 different areas of the Tower of London. Now that it's owned by Queen Elizabeth, there's a shop in there. There's a place to get your tickets at. There's also even part of the tower that's part of the medieval times that's still standing to this day. There are some areas that are marked off. You can actually walk into the salt tower as well. There's also Trader's Gate. That was the gate that Anne Boleyn passed through when she was sentenced for high treason and was sent to the tower. That was the Trader's Gate that she went in. Although it's flooded right now because when the workers were trying to do some construction work, it ended up filling too much up with water, so it became unusable and became to where you just really couldn't access it, so it's blocked off by bricks. Back in those times, that was where all of the people who were sent to the tower to be either executed or to be imprisoned or to even be tortured for that matter, they were sent through that gate. That was the gate that Anne entered. I'm not really sure if that was the same gate that Catherine Howard entered. I'm assuming so, if she was executed at Tower Green. It was also said that when Anne was executed, her scaffold was decorated, and it was also said that when Catherine Howard was executed, her scaffold was just a normal scaffold with straw in it. It was almost like Henry just wanted to erase her. He didn't really care, which I'll talk more about that in a video. But that's just some facts about it. If you wish to tour it in London ever, go check it out. It's really worth it to go see it because it holds a lot of history. Some of it dark, some of it light. It was also said it was one of the places that King Henry VIII hated because his mother had stayed there during the rebellion against Henry VII, and she supposedly died there due to complications after giving birth to one of his sisters, I'm assuming, and he just never liked it, and there was somebody else that was close to him, I think, that died at the Tower of London or something, and he just never really liked being there. It was also said that the Queen's Apartments was one of the places where Anne Boleyn stayed at for her coronation, and then she also stayed in the same place she stayed at when she was being crowned Queen of England. She also stayed there when she was charged with high treason and was sentenced to be executed. So there's a little fact about that. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. If you haven't already, hit that red subscribe button and that notification bell so you'll be notified as to when I upload videos in the future. Also, don't forget to give this episode a like, a thumbs up. It really helps me out and it helps the channel out as well. Also, don't forget to go check out all of my social medias. They're listed in the description box below this episode. I hope you guys have an awesome afternoon or day or night wherever you are watching this from. And I will see you all in my next video. Haters.